Ardi Imseis is on the Legal Counsel Board for Palestine at the ICJ hearings and joins us live now from The Hague. Ardi, thank you very much for your time this evening. Now, you were at the hearing. It's the start of a week of addresses by more than 50 nations. What was your takeaway from today?
First, thanks for having me. Look, the takeaway is that we feel very positive about the case that we brought before the court today. Occupation is meant to be temporary, and this one has lasted 56 years and is going on its 57th year. And during the course of this occupation, the occupying power has pursued a course of policies and practices that violate what international lawyers call peremptory norms of international law. And those norms are unique because you may never, ever derogate from them. There are no exceptions to these norms. This is the violation of the Palestinian people's right to self-determination, the prohibition on territorial conquest, and the prohibition on the imposition of regimes of racial discrimination and/or apartheid. And so we argue that by virtue of the occupation's existential connection, organic connection, reliance to the violation of all three of these norms, that the regime itself is an internationally wrongful act. Not merely the actions, each of these norms being violated, but the regime that gives rise to the violation of those actions is itself unlawful. And so if the occupation of the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip, is unlawful, then it must be brought to an immediate, unconditional, and total end, and that all third states in the world are responsible for making that happen. And we do hope that the International Court of Justice will order in the way that we have pled the case.
And Ardi, as I mentioned then, we'll hear addresses from more than 50 nations, but Israel doesn't recognize these hearings. Why so? And who's representing their case?
Right. I mean, in the first instance, that's a question for the Israeli government. What I can say is that the Israelis did submit a written submission prior to these oral hearings that was very short, very curt, basically arguing a political argument that the court should not seize jurisdiction over this matter. But there really wasn't much substance to it. These written submissions, including that of the State of Israel, will be available on the court's website for the general public shortly, if they're not already there. My general sense, based on what I've seen in the public record from the Israelis, is they don't wish to bestow any legitimacy on the court or what the court might have to say. But more technically, I can say as an international lawyer, there really is no answer to the case that we brought. It's an unanswerable case because these violations, as I said, are peremptory. There can be no defense for violating a people's right to self-determination, nor for imposing a regime of racial discrimination and apartheid against them, or for acquiring their territory through force. And so I suspect that might be one reason why the Israelis have not appeared. There really is no defense to these positions.
And Ardi, important to point out once again that these rulings are non-binding. So how significant then are they?
That's an excellent question. I mean, technically, an advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice is not binding. However, to the extent that the World Court, or the International Court of Justice, as it's generally called, is the principal judicial organ of the United Nations and the highest judicial body on planet Earth, tasked with engaging with international law and interpreting international law, what it says is highly persuasive. And historically, we know that advisory opinions of the court have helped establish law, going all the way back to 1948 and even prior to that. For instance, the reparations case in 1949, I believe, establishes the international legal personality of the United Nations, even though it was done in an advisory opinion. And so as well, to the extent that the court pronounces on principles of peremptory international law, or indeed customary international legal principles, those things would be binding in any case. So what the hope is that once the opinion comes down, and if it does come down positively for the state of Palestine and the many states who support it, I might add, that those findings will help shape what is regarded as politically and legally legitimate within the halls of the United Nations when it comes to dealing with ending the occupation. The most important thing is, if the occupation is unlawful, then the law of state responsibility, international law, requires that it be ended forthwith, unconditionally, and totally. And that means it can't be made, the end of the occupation cannot be made subject to negotiation. And that's a big deal because of the imbalance of powers between the occupying power on the one hand and the beleaguered Palestinian population subject to its military control on the other. However, does one negotiate the end of their bondage with their jailer?
And one final short question, if you would, please. How long before the court's expected to deliver this advisory opinion, indeed the one which will carry moral authority, as you pointed out there?
We expect that the court should be able to deliver an opinion during the summer, perhaps July. That's just speculation. An advisory opinion case is different than a contentious case of the sort, for instance, that is now before the court regarding South Africa and in Israel, by virtue of the fact that Israel is putting up a defense in that case, and there's a lot of procedural elements that need to be dealt with along the way. That case won't be done for a number of years. Whereas in an advisory opinion case, this case has been brought by the General Assembly of the United Nations formally, and it doesn't take much time for the court to opine on it and give its opinion to the General Assembly to assist the General Assembly in its management, in this case, of the question of Palestine.
Ardi, you have a long week ahead, so we'll let you go. Thank you very much for joining us. Ardi Imseis, live from The Hague.